I recently lost my workplace rival. They're not dead or anything, they just moved to a different company. And what makes that sentence funnier or sadder, depending on your caffeine levels, is that I actually never met them in person. We worked in different branches of the same company, 2 points of light orbiting the same corporate sun. We were hired around the same time, climbed the same mountains, endured the same storm. Different offices, same madness. And yet somehow we were bound together. Our higher-ups would whisper our names like competing legends. Top performers, they'd say, neck and neck again this week. I never saw their face beyond a medium of pixels, would occasionally hear their voice, maybe a meeting or two here and there, but I knew them. The same way rival athletes know each other through stats and headlines. The same way ancient kings know their enemies through rumors and scars. To me, they weren't just a coworker. They were the other. A figure in the fog who gave shape to my own ambition. Every time they beat a metric, I'd stay late. Every time I pulled ahead, I imagined them scowling somewhere across the state. I was sure they were thinking about me too, locked in this beautiful, pointless arms race. They probably weren't. They probably didn't even care. See, they seemed like the disciplined type. Structured, organized, radiating positive energy like some kind of motivational poster that learned how to breathe. Meanwhile, I was cultivating my whole tortured genius aesthetic. The chaotic visionary with a coffee IV drip, and a superiority complex dressed as creative independence. We were opposites in every way, and maybe that's why it worked. I hated them. Not really. Or rather, the idea of them. Because the idea of them was perfect, flawless. The sort of rival that can only exist in imagination, where they always win just enough to make you furious and inspired in equal measure. Then one day, quite recently, they called me, as they tended to do. Said they were taking another position elsewhere. And if you've seen my videos before, you already know that I'm a little bit insane and treat everything like life in a competition, including who can finish lunch faster. So of course my first thought was, did I win? Followed closely by, wait, what do I do now? Because I realized something weird. I wasn't competing against them. I was competing because of them. They were the invisible gravity keeping me in orbit, and now with them gone, there's just space. I've spent the last few days wondering who could possibly fill the void. Who could unknowingly become my next nemesis, my next phantom benchmark, my next reason to get up early and pretend I'm not spiraling. But no one quite fits. No one carries the same mystique of the rival I never met. And maybe that's the point. The rivalry doesn't need proximity. It doesn't even need contact. It just needs someone to remind you that you could be better, or at least to make you want to be. Because in the end, we're all haunted by someone we're trying to outrun. Sometimes they're in another branch, sometimes they're in another version of yourself. Competition is stitched into the human condition like a hidden watermark. You don't see it most days, but hold life up to the light, and there it is. The faint, invisible drive whispering, do better, be better, win. It's not something we were taught, it's something we inherited. From the moment the first human stared across the fire at another human holding a slightly sharper rock, something ancient clicked inside our skulls. Comparison. Psychologists have a name for it. Social comparison theory. How apt. In 1954, Leon Festinger proposed that humans determine their own worth based on how they stack up against others. You don't know how good you are until you have a you, but slightly better, to measure against. It's why a student might feel brilliant in one classroom and painfully average in another. It's why a runner pushes harder when someone is one step ahead of them. It's why the human brain, despite all its poetry and potential, still loves a good scoreboard. But what starts as comparison often mutates into something more intimate. Competition becomes rivalry, because rivalry isn't just about winning, it's about becoming. A rival isn't someone you hate. Not really. They're a mirror that makes you see yourself sharper, clearer, sometimes uglier. They pull you into orbit around your own potential. You don't rise to meet their standard because you hate them. You do it because some part of you is terrified to be forgotten by them. The rival is that invisible hand that drags you upwards or sideways. At its core, rivalry is both a curse and a gift. A rival gives you something rare in this modern world of self-help mantras and participation trophies. Urgency. You don't have time to trust the process when your rival is the process. In sports, rivalry sharpens skills. In science, it sharpens discovery. In art, it sharpens truth. You can even track it neurologically. Rivalry lights up the part of the brain regions associated with both reward and threat, dopamine and cortisol in an elegant, miserable tango. It's the same cocktail of hormones that fuels both genius and burnout. But here's the strange paradox. We perform better when we have something to chase. Studies have shown that athletes run faster, programmers code cleaner, and students push harder when competing against someone of similar ability. Humans are goal-seeking missiles, but without a target, we spiral. The rival gives shape to the void. They give direction to chaos. And when the rival disappears, as rivals inevitably do, we feel the loss like grief, because we weren't just chasing a person, we were chasing meaning. It's tempting to think rivalry is destructive, that it breeds envy and arrogance, and yes, it can. Left unchecked, it corrodes the spirit. Rivalry forces focus. Nothing sharpens intent like the faint echo of footsteps behind you. Rivalry erases complacency. Without it, you plateau, becoming comfortably average, but with it, even rest feels like surrender. Rivalry teaches humility, because every time you win, your rival wins twice, and that keeps your ego from metastasizing. Rivalry creates identity. The rival defines the edges of who you are. Without them, you're just floating in abstraction. Against them, you become someone with form, intent, purpose. Rivalry gives meaning to effort. It turns the mundane into myth. The spreadsheets, the sets, the sketches, all of it becomes a part of the story about you versus them. And that story, effort finally feels alive. Of course, rivalry comes at a price. It warps perception, breeds obsession, and can turn ambition into self-destruction. But maybe that's what makes it so beautifully human. We are not creatures of peace. We are creatures of contrast. We define joy through suffering, success through failure, strength through struggle, and ourselves through rivals. The rival is both muse and mirror. They're the reasons we wake up early, the reasons we stay late, the reasons we grind our teeth at night and call it passion. They are the reminder that greatness isn't achieved in solitude but in friction, because you can't measure your light without someone else's shadow. Rivalry, though maddening and exhausting, isn't an enemy to outgrow. It's a companion, a necessary madness that keeps the story moving forward. If we strip it down to its bones, rivalry is simply this: a human seeing another human and thinking, I can be more. And maybe when you zoom out far enough, that's what progress has always been. One person trying to outdo another, and doing so, dragging the rest of us a little closer to something divine. There's something quietly tragic about what happens when the rivalry ends. When the scoreboard stops updating. When the invisible tug-of-war loses tension. When the name that once haunted your daily metrics simply disappears. You expect to feel victorious, but instead it feels like the air goes still. The adrenaline that used to fuel your mornings now lingers awkwardly, unsure where to go. You look around, waiting for the next opponent to materialize, but there's only silence, because no one ever tells you that a rival is also a kind of companion, a ghost you grew accustomed to fighting in the dark. In their absence, you come to realize rivalry isn't sustainable forever. It's a phase, one that forces you to dig deeper into who you are, but also one that eventually demands to be released. No rivalry can last forever without collapsing under its own intensity. Even Achilles had to lower his spear, eventually. Rivalry sharpens us, but it can't be the thing that defines us indefinitely. The blade that redefines you can just as easily cut too deep if never set down. When the rival leaves, whether they quit, move, retire, or simply stop caring, you're left with the strange inheritance. All the effort, all the focus, all the drive they unknowingly gave you, you carry that momentum long after they've gone. The rival becomes a myth stitched into your work ethic. You still chase them in some abstract way, trying to live up to the version of yourself that existed when they were watching, even if they weren't. But maybe that's the beauty of it. The rival doesn't have to stay for their influence to endure. Like a star that's already died, their light still reaches you, long after the source is gone. You learn that the point of rivalry was never victory, it was transformation. The rival was just the medium. You, unknowingly, were the artist shaping yourself through the friction. In the aftermath of rivalry comes something rare: introspection. Once the noise fades, you can finally hear the quiet voice behind it all, the one asking, why did I need to win so badly in the first place? Sometimes the question is uncomfortable. It exposes the truth that rivalry was never truly about the other person. It was about trying to outrun your own reflection. Eventually you realize the final rival is always yourself. The version you were yesterday, the one that settled, the one that got comfortable. You can't fight that rival the way you fought another person. You can only learn to negotiate with it, to forgive it, outgrow it, evolve past it without hatred. The external rival teaches you to run, the internal rival teaches you to endure. And yet there's still something sacred about the external kind, because in a world drowning in apathy, rivalry means someone made you care. Someone unknowingly flipped a switch inside you that said, I want to be better. That's not something to dismiss lightly. Most of us spend the lives searching for some kind of ignition, or something or someone that makes us burn. Rivalry, then, is not the opposite of peace. It's the proof that we're alive. It's evidence that something inside us still hungers, still aches to matter. And one day, when you're older, you might think back to the rivals who pushed you, those distant, imagined figures who occupied your thoughts like constellations. You might smile and realize they were never your enemies. They were the midwives of your becoming. Because without them, your story would have been shorter, easier maybe, but emptier too. Rivalry is not a war, it's dialogue. It's two souls knowingly, or not, saying to each other, "Show me what I could be." And if we're lucky, we find enough of them across a lifetime to never stop growing. Because in the end, when the lights dim and the scoreboard fades, you don't remember the numbers or the victories. You remember the chase, the tension, the striving. You remember the rival who made you reach further than you thought possible, and maybe somewhere out there, they remember you too. There's a point, quiet, almost imperceptible, where the rivalry dissolves into something gentler. What once felt like a storm begins to feel like weathered wood, smooth from friction, softened by time. The sharp edges of comparison fade, leaving behind a strange affection for the person who unknowingly sculpted you through opposition. You start to realize it was never really about defeating them. It was about being in motion, about having something to push against, without resistance. Even greatness stagnates. A river without rocks is just a puddle. As the years pass, you start to look back at the tension with gratitude. You remember the late nights spent chasing invisible numbers, the petty victories, the moments where you nearly gave up, but didn't because someone, somewhere, might have been doing the same thing, a little better. That invisible pressure was the crucible that hardened your resolve. You might have cursed their name, but they were the unseen mentor who taught you discipline without ever saying a word. In that way, rivalry becomes a quiet kind of love story. Not romantic love, don't get me wrong, I did not love this person, but the kind of love that demands betterment. The kind that says, I see you and I refuse to let you be less than what you could be. A rival doesn't hand you comfort, they hand you clarity. They make you aware of the distance between who you are and who you could be, and they hold that mirror steady, no matter how much you squirm. There's a reason history remembers rivalries much more vividly than victories. Tesla and Edison, Da Vinci and Michelangelo, Senna and Proust. Each pair immortalized not for their trophies they've collected, but for the friction that made them both unforgettable. The rival makes your existence legible to history. Without opposition, genius fades like smoke. With it, it becomes a beacon. Rivalry gives permanence to effort, carving meaning from struggle in a way peace never could. But there's danger too. And mistaking rivalry for identity, because once you've defined yourself against someone else long enough, it's hard to know who you are without them, you might even start creating phantom rivals, imaginary opponents conjured to keep the game alive. It's a coping mechanism, a refusal to admit that part of the story is over. And maybe that's okay. Maybe rivalry, even when it becomes an illusion, still serves its purpose. Better to invent a challenge than to sink into apathy. Still, at some point, you have to lay the rivalry to rest. You have to look at the ghosts of your former opponents and say, thank you, but I've got it from here. That's the final stage of rivalry, integration. The lessons remain, but the fixations dissolve. You absorb the rival into yourself, their strengths, their steadiness, their unrelenting drive. They stop being an external figure and become an internal compass. The pursuit becomes personal, inward, and infinite. And that's when you understand the quiet truth rivalry was hiding all along, that you were never chasing them. You were never chasing your own potential. They were just the outline, the silhouette that gave form to your ambition. All rivalry is, in the end, self-confrontation wearing someone else's face. But that doesn't make it meaningless. It makes it human, because we don't grow in stillness, we grow in tension. We grow when something or someone presses against us and demands movement. Rivalry is the purest expression of that demand. It's the universe whispering through another person, you are not finished yet. And if you're lucky, one day you'll meet another like them. A new rival, a new mirror, a new spark, someone who unsettles your peace just enough to make you hungry again. Because the absence of rivalry isn't serenity, it's decay. Growth needs pressure the way fire needs oxygen. So maybe the healthiest thing we can do is welcome our rivals, thank them, even when they make us miserable, to understand that in some strange cosmic way, they're not obstacles, they're collaborators in the great unfinished project of who we are. Because when all is said and done, the rival isn't really the one across the finish line. It's the one inside you that refuses to stop running. With that said, let's talk about some great historical rivalries, and fictitious, I guess you could say. But kicking us off, the rivalry between Nikola Tesla and Thomas Edison. The rivalry between Nikola Tesla and Thomas Edison wasn't forged in laboratories, but in exhaustion. Under the glow of electric light, still young enough to feel like witchcraft, when Tesla first arrived in America, he worked under Edison, a man already mythologized for bending lightning into profit. The story goes that Edison promised Tesla $50,000 if he could redesign his inefficient motors and generators. A small fortune in the late 1800s, and a small fortune still now. Tesla, tirelessly and idealistic, stayed up for nights on end, reworking Edison's machinery until it ran smoother than ever. When he presented the results, Edison laughed. "Tesla," he said, "you don't understand our American humor." Tesla quit the same day. That moment wasn't just a disagreement between two inventors, it was the spark that ignited one of history's most poetic rivalries. Edison believed in practicality, patents, and the grindstone of progress. Tesla believed in purity and the untamed dream of wireless energy illuminating the planet for free. Edison wanted to own electricity. Tesla wanted to liberate it. They weren't enemies in the traditional sense, they were opposites in philosophy. The grounded realist and the celestial visionary, each building their own cathedral out of currents and pride. The feud became known as the War of Currents, a contest between Edison's direct current and Tesla's alternating current. A war fought not with soldiers, but with light bulbs, demonstrations, and public stunts. Edison electrocuted animals in crowded squares to prove Tesla's designs were dangerous. Tesla, in turn, stood calmly as voltage coursed through his own body to show how harmless his system could be. It was brutal, theatrical, absurd, and it changed the world. Neither man truly won. Edison died rich and revered. Tesla died alone in a hotel room, feeding pigeons and talking to ghosts. But if you flip a switch today, if you hear the low hum of power beneath your feet, you're hearing Tesla's revenge. His current won the war. His dream survived the dreamer. And somewhere buried in that invisible network of wires and waves, the echo of their rivalry still hums. Proof that sometimes the world moves forward not through agreement, but through the collision of two stubborn visions, each daring the other to be brighter. Before philosophy, before history, before adulthood turned ambition into anxiety, there was Ash Ketchum and Gary Oak, two kids chasing the same dream under the same pixelated sunrise. Their rivalry wasn't written in spreadsheets or sales reports, but in gym badges and stubborn pride. Gary was the golden boy, Oak's grandson, prodigy, the kind of kid who made success look effortless. He showed up with a convertible, a small fan club, and a smirk that could fuel an entire childhood's worth of motivation. Ash, meanwhile, overslept on day one, burned his first alarm clock, and wound up with a half-charred Pikachu that refused to listen. It was destiny disguised as disaster. And yet, every time Gary appeared mocking, teasing, and already 2 steps ahead, Ash found a new reason to push forward. Gary was the measuring stick, the storm cloud on the horizon. Every loss stung, but every sting sharpened him. Gary won with confidence. Ash lost with heart. It was never hate between them. It was gravity. One pulled, the other chased, and the chase became everything. After years of trading victories, after hundreds of miles and dozens of defeats, they meet again not as enemies, but as equals. Gary, older and wiser, decides to leave battling behind to become a researcher, following his grandfather's path. Ash doesn't gloat, he doesn't even really smile. He just looks at Gary with the silent understanding that rivals only reach when the fire between them burns into respect. It's the end of an era, the first lesson in what all rivalry eventually becomes: acknowledgement. Ash never really beat Gary, not in spirit, but that was never the point. Gary was the necessary shadow, the invisible mentor, the reason Ash learned what persistence really meant. He wasn't there to be conquered, he was there to awaken something. Every taunt, every loss, every narrow second place finish carved Ash into a kind of person who could keep chasing. Not just victory, but purpose. That's the secret no one tells you about rivalry. It's not about the trophy, it's about transformation. Gary Oak may have driven away in that ridiculous car, leaving a trail of dust and arrogance, but in the rearview mirror, he left something priceless. A rival who became unstoppable simply because he had someone to chase. Finally, there's a rivalry older than Tesla and Edison, older than Ash and Gary, older than humanity itself, the internal tension between meaning and meaningless. It's the quiet duel that plays out in every mind that ever stayed awake too long, staring at the ceiling asking, what's the point? It just doesn't have uniforms, trophies, or scoreboards, just a battlefield made of consciousness. There's a rivalry older than Tesla, older than Ash and Gary, older than humanity itself, the internal tension between meaning and meaningless. It's the quiet duel that plays out in every mind that ever stayed awake too long, staring at the ceiling, asking, what's the point? It doesn't have uniforms, trophies, or scoreboards, just a battlefield made of consciousness. Meaning and meaningless are the universe's longest argument. Meaning builds temples, paints canvases, writes symphonies. It's the voice that insists there must be something. Meaningless, on the other hand, sits cross-legged beside it, shrugging. It doesn't destroy, it just asks questions that make the scaffolding tremble. Why bother? Who cares? What difference will any of this make in 100 years? They need each other. Meaning is brave, but delusional without its rival. Meaningless is honest, but paralyzing without resistance. Their friction gives rise to everything we call human art, science, religion, rebellion. Every great work, every quiet act of kindness, every desperate love story is an argument against the void. We build the monuments not to last forever, but to pretend they might. And that pretense, the refusal to accept insignificance, is meaning's most beautiful lie. You can see it in the small moments, the artist painting even though no one's watching, the worker perfecting a detail You can see it in the small moments, the artist painting even when no one's watching, the worker perfecting a detail no one will ever notice, the parents telling a story that will be forgotten in generations, but told anyway because it matters now. Meaning is the defiance of entropy. It's a candle lit in a windstorm knowing full well it will go out, but choosing to burn anyways. Meaningless isn't evil, it's gravity. It pulls at us to keep us honest. Reminds us that none of this is guaranteed, and maybe that the real rivalry, not good versus evil, not light versus dark, but hope versus entropy. The endless back and forth between the part of us that builds and the part of us that whispers, why bother? Every time you create something, every time you love, laugh, or dream, you're not just living. You're competing against the void, against the absurdity of it all, against the silence waiting at the edges of existence, and even if the void always wins in the end, even if everything we build eventually falls to dust, there's something sacred in the fight itself. Because meaningless can claim the universe, but meaning only needs one life to rebel, and for a brief, brilliant moment, it wins. In the end, every rivalry, whether it's fought with ideas, fist, or quiet persistence, is just another way of saying we're alive. Tesla and Edison electrified the world because neither could stand the thought of being forgotten. Ash and Gary ran themselves ragged, chasing each other through fields of pixels because one boy's arrogance made another boy's dream feel possible. And the rivalry between meaning and meaningless, the one that never ends, it's the oldest and most intimate war we know. The human heart beating defiantly against the indifferent void. That's the strange beauty of rivalry. It's never really about the other person. It's about motion. It's the tension that keeps the pendulum swinging. The reason we scrawl out of bed instead of sinking into stillness. Rivalry is the friction that turns survival into story. It's the reminder that excellence doesn't happen in isolation. It happens in collision. We sharpen ourselves on each other, on the universe, on the parts of life that refuse to yield. Maybe that's what makes us human. Not the victories, not the losses, but the sheer stubborn refusal to stop striving. Rivalry is the pulse beneath everything. Our art, our science, our love, our laughter. Every invention, every song, every whispered, I can do better, is just one more round in that internal dance between what is and what could be. So if you ever find yourself looking for someone with that mix of admiration and annoyance, that gnawing urge to catch up, don't resent it. Thank it. That's the universe handing you a reason to move, a rival to chase, a mirror to grow against. Because someday, when the lights dim and the scoreboard fades, you'll realize the truth. You were never running from them. You were running toward yourself. And in that endless race between chaos and order, between meaning and the void, there are no true winners, just runners, just sparks, just souls too stubborn to stop burning. Peace out.